Committee. I will open with a karakia timataka. Tū taua mai I ruka, tū taua mai I raro, tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai I waho, kia tau I te Māori tū, te Māori ora ki te katoa, haumie, huie, taiki. And before we start, I would just like to say a few words for Upoko David Allison. A small tribute for a mighty man to whom, for me, stood like a mighty totra, and for whom I was in a difficult time, for which I am very, very grateful. And I've just chosen a few words from Robert Burns, who sits outside, which has special meaning to me when I think about David. The friend of man, the friend of truth, the friend of age and guide of youth, few hearts like his with virtue warmed, few heads with knowledge so informed. If there's another world, he lives in bliss. Are there any other tributes, Mandy?
Morena, te whānau. Ōpuku David was a very special man, and I feel incredibly privileged. All the people that knew him were welcomed under his korowai, and particularly it was his community-mindedness that resonated with me, and the things that he taught me, and I think it's best summarised by the words of his friend John, who said to me that every morning David woke up and he considered what it was that he could contribute to his community, and that was how he was able to achieve so much. I was very privileged in recent months to be with David at the opening of the Athena Plunkett Centre in South Dunedin, which for him was very important that his dad, Motu Allison, was recognised as the first Karatane Plunkett baby, and there's a consultation room there now with Motu's name on it. And for very many years, David advocated for the midwives of Karatane to be recognised as the midwives, Mary Harper and Ria Tikini, sorry. I'm just remembering off the top of my head. He had a very strong relationship with our sister city, Chinese Gardens, and it was wonderful to attend those sister city celebrations. And most of all, David was a protector of the environment, of vulnerable people, of marginalised citizens. So he worked a lot with the disabilities sector, he worked a lot with our refugees committee, and he had a very important role at the Orokonui Eco Sanctuary. The closest I've ever come as a Kiwi to a Kiwi bird was in David's arms, and he was a part of the releasing of the saddlebacks, the tiki, back when the Eco Sanctuary was first established, and sadly predatory animals managed to annihilate those birds, and we've waited more than a decade for the population to increase to the point that only a few weeks ago they were re-released in their hundreds back to the Eco Sanctuary. And for David, that felt like an enormously satisfying, victorious moment, that he was able to come to the end of his life and see these special chapters completed for him. And you know, he saw in his 88th birthday, he saw in another year, he saw in another Waitangi Day, and the words that he lived by, his favourite hymn, words to live by, te aroha, te whakapono, te rangimarie, love and faith and peace. Te aroha, te whakapono, te rangimarie, tato tato e, te aroha, te whakapono, me te rangimarie, tātou tātou e. Kia ora. I'd also like to say, on behalf of the city, a thank you to our chief executive, who has agreed to pay for all of the tribute sheets for the whānau as a part of, as a gesture from the city. Thank you.
Anybody else like to say anything? Carmen?
I would. I didn't know David well, but I met him quite a few times. And I just wanted to acknowledge the love and support that Mandy and Tahu Mackenzie gave him. Whenever I saw him, they were always with him. And he looked so happy. You know, he had these two women with him all the time, and he was doted on. And he certainly didn't, anything he needed. They were there within a second whenever I saw him. And he did look very happy. So, all the best, David, on your journey now. And obviously condolences to the family. Yeah.
Okay, we'll just have a minute's silence for David. Kia ora everybody, and thank you for that, and we will move into our meeting. There is no public forum this morning, and we have a number of apologies. Apologies have been received from Mayor Raddick, Councillors Bill Eklund, Marilla Fiso and Ms Megan Portakey, plus Councillor Christine Gary and Andrew Wiley for early departure. I hate to curse the meeting, but hopefully that won't be necessary. So I move that the committee accepts the apologies from Mayor Raddick, Councillors Bill Eklund, Marilla Fiso, Ms Megan Portakey for absence, and Councillor Christine Gary, and Andrew Wiley for early departure if needed. Seconded by Councillor Gilbert. All those in favour? Anyone against? Abstentions? That is carried. The confirmation of the agenda. Has anybody got anything they want to say? No. Therefore, I will move that the committee confirms the agenda without additional alteration. Seconded by Councillor Gilbert. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Abstentions? I declare the motion is carried. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded of the need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between their role as an elected representative and any private or other external interests they may have. Are there any changes or updates? There being none, I will move that the confirms the notes. Notes the elected members' interest register attached to that attachment A, and confirms the proposed management plan for elected members' interests. Seconded by Councillor Gilbert. Put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Abstentions? That is carried. And we'll move on to Part A reports. The Forward Work Programme, item 6. Ms Moran will speak to the report, and there are some other staff to ask questions. Have you got any opening comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No opening comments. Staff are ready to take questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you. It's just a minor question on page 23 in regards to the Sports Ground Reserve Management Plan. Now, I know that Sport Otago have finished their work that they've done on reviewing sports facilities, the requirements for sporting in the city. So does that information dovetail into our work? I mean, I don't know whether it's been presented to council. I don't know. I just want to know that that work from Sport Otago will feed in.
Kia ora, Councillor. Yes, it does feed in.
And will councillors see the Sport Otago work, because I know they've spent a long time doing that, and it's obviously a significant report that would obviously be worthwhile reading as well as part of that.
I can follow up, but there's no reason if it's a public document that we can't circulate that.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you. I have a similar question related to the reserve management plan, and I ask it as a councillor has sat on the Signal Hill plan and the ongoing town belt plan. The time, because everything does dovetail into the management, the reserve management plan, so it's just basically the timing around that. I think it's, from memory, it's about a year, but be...
Sorry, which plan?
So the overall reserve management plan, is it the sub-plans, for want of a better word? Are we on the...
Yes, is that on page 20, the general policies plan?
It doesn't need to be answered now. It's just a generic question around that overarching reserve plan work. And
Sorry, were you asking when does that come?
my assumption is about a year away. Is that about right? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Just
It's been to council last year, it's now been consulted on. So there's a little bit of a process that it sort of depends on what the consultation brings back as to how long the process is.
the questioner relates to the previous questioner, actually, because a lot of the other plans, like the Signal Hill Reserve Management Plan, the Town Belt, is underpinned by this. So it relates to that question. So it was just more a timing question. It's absolutely not important, but it'd be good to get some analysis of when that's going to be done. I'm sorry about the perplexed look. It's fine. Don't answer it now. We can talk about it afterwards. Thought it was
I do, from memory, I think a timetable was accompanied the report last year, but we can recirculate that.
Councillor O'Malley.
Just see in the forward work program, South Dunedin Futures is April, coming in with a workshop. Is it going to be more than a workshop, though? I thought it was going to be a presentation of a report.
I thought we were getting a report.
Yeah, that is correct. There will be both a workshop and a report coming. Yes.
I think the report might be. Is it coming to council? Is that why it's not on this?
Yes.
board?
Sorry. Yes, it will be coming. So it's not on here. Yep. So, yep.
Any other questions? Thank you. Therefore, I will move that the committee notes the Strategy Planning and Engagement Committee Forward Work Programme. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gilbert. Would anyone like to speak to the motion? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Abstentions? I declare the motion is carried. And now we'll welcome to the table Mr. David Ward and Mr. Paul Freeline. I saw you get here just in time. Hope you're not too puffed. Welcome, gentlemen, and we're going to talk about the submission on the Resource Management Consenting and Other System Changes Amendment Bill. Do you have anything to add?
Well, just to note, Madam Chair, obviously the draft submission hadn't been appended to the report. Sincerest apologies for that, but confident that you'd had the visibility through the earlier discussions and workshops. Yeah, again, apologies for that omission.
Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Gary.
Oh, I potentially have lots, but I'll just focus on paragraph 15, natural hazards and emergencies, and I was interested to see, this is 15 in the report, and then it's I think 12 in the paper. Any further comments on this in terms of the impact on council, impact on the community? Because this is a really biggie. It's a positive in some ways, but I'm sure with the complexity, it's not straightforward at all. Paul, any comments?
Through the chair, this is really a fix to what is actually a gap in the Resource Management Act at the moment. Currently, a subdivision consent can be declined because of the presence of natural hazards, but a land use consent cannot be. And so it's just closing that gap, and the government through MFE are doing a lot of work about natural hazards and natural hazard decision making, and as touched upon in that section, they're actively working on a national direction around natural hazard decision making. So it's filling a gap. It means that our consents team isn't caught with having to approve development which they know isn't a logical place to have that stuff.
So it's one of the few positives, really. This is a positive in the initiative. How soon do you think we'll see that come into effect?
It's difficult to say how quickly the government works through these bills, but there's a bill before the government, and they're obviously going to go through the select committee stage. I think Mr Mayor's been invited to talk to this paper as well, and it'll just be their schedule.
And the other question I'll ask is paragraph 12 in the report, which is around the exclusion of elected members from the appointment to the SPP panels. Any further comments more than the report on that, please?
Through the Chair, the streamlined planning process is something which Dunedin City hasn't used to date. It enables councils to go direct to the Minister for the Environment and request under certain circumstances for the Minister to come up with a bespoke process for a plan change. We haven't felt the need to do that so far, but generally in the past it has involved a panel which we would have some say in who the membership would be, and this proposal obviously takes away the ability potentially for elected councillors with suitable qualifications and training and experience to take part in that. And obviously we don't think that's a good idea.
And is that view widely held amongst other local authorities?
So I can't talk for all local authorities, but we are involved in an Otago Southland group, and they hold the same sort of views, and I think the Taitura submission or draft submission made the same points.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to go first? Oh, okay. And my question was just around, I note in the letter that the DCC wrote to the Minister for RMA Reform and the Minister for the Environment in June 2024, and we requesting a requirement for the to implement the standards was suspended until after blah, 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 blah. Did we get a reply?
We did.
Oh.
The reply wasn't definitive. It wasn't a yes, definite yes, we could suspend them, or no, we can't. We understand that other councils, including Auckland, have asked the same question. It's just because of the masses of change which are coming that implementing the national planning standards now would be a huge cost to the council, and with the unknown around what the new RMA or the equivalent of the RMA will be and all the other national direction changes, it just seems like a sensible thing to suspend them at the moment.
And my next question was just around talking about the implementation that's required by the planning standards will require a full or near full review of the district plan. And I just wondered if, I don't know if I'm asking about how long is a piece of string, about what sort of costs are involved to council to change a district plan. Are we talking in the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands, or small sums?
You'll be at least the hundreds of thousands. It's no small thing to review a whole district plan. It took us several years last time. We notified in 2015. We haven't quite resolved all the appeals to the 2GP yet. And once you get to the Environment Court, legal fees and costs, etc., you've got a long piece of string.
Thank you. Councillor O'Malley.
It's just actually back to the streamlined planning process. We don't use it very much. Is it a tool that's used very much by other territorial authorities?
To be clear, we haven't used it at all.
That's not very much at all.
That's not very much true. I presume it's being used by other territorial local authorities, but because of the way the process works, we haven't followed it. It can be that the Minister can direct, for instance, that there's no further submissions, there's no rights of appeal. It may not even make it into the public arena or the wider arena that often.
It's a good reason for us not to use it, really, to be honest. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Reports, paragraph 6, the first bullet point there, Mr Freeland. And this is around specifying the default maximum timeframes for consent processing. What impact would that have on staffing and resourcing, given where we're at with processing times at the moment? And I know our people are very efficient with that, but having a default maximum, we do to some extent now, but what would be your thoughts on that?
So I've consulted with Alan Worthington, the consents manager. This change is really about giving the renewable energy and the infrastructure consents a longer period of time within which to give effect to them. So it makes no difference to our processing times as such, but it just reflects the fact that for some of these things, if you give them a 5 or 10 year time period within which to implement them or get them started, that can be difficult to achieve. Things can change with the economy and all sorts of things. 35 years, or whatever was proposed here, means that we don't end up with the consents lapsing and for them having to go through the process again, perhaps getting a different outcome.
Thank you for the clarification.
Are there any other questions? And therefore, I will move the resolution as per the papers that you're going to put it up, thank you. We approve the submission, authorise the Chief Executive to make any minor editorial amendments. I don't think there were any brought up during the time, and note that the Mayoral Delegate will speak to any hearings in regard to the submission. And in talking about this, seconder. Thank you, Councillor Gilbert. In speaking to this, I think we did a couple of submissions yesterday, and it appears that this is the same things that will have the same repercussions. There are both good and bad in this one, and I will think about this, that yes, it makes it easier to get some things fast-tracked through, which is good. And when we look at the example that they gave us, which was about the hospital, about balancing off the heritage versus the economy or the community, then we're able to do that. The key concerns in here were, for me, that I saw was it's positive to have the flexibility to consider all options for council. This is themed to around housing growth, and that was really important, so we're not being constrained in what we can do. So that was good. The thing that really concerned me was excluding elected members from decision making, and we have a government that before the election talked about localism and now is trying to, it appears, to exclude councillors who are RMA commissioners and who have worked on the plans and know about these things from being part of making the decisions, and that is extremely concerning. The other point that I was thinking about was the natural hazards and emergencies as well. It would be a bit silly to know about a hazard and then let someone build a house on it, basically. So that is really good that it closes the gap, as Mr. Freeland said, and that we are able to immediately, if we have a natural hazard, to work with that. And then the other thing that I was concerned about was the implementation of national planning standards in an environment of change. And when we asked the question about how much does it cost for a district plan change, and we're looking in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this reform is something that is just going too fast and possibly not in a considered manner, that's making it very difficult for us as councils to respond to. So I think I did my notes were, again, like yesterday, the costs that the government is inflicting on a staff time, the costs of going to the Environment Court, the changes again when our staff are busy working on other staff, more regulation rather than less regulation, removing localism, and I think that is a really key thing about not having the ability to have elected members representing the community on these panels, and then putting more unfunded mandates on councils, which is something that we all hate. More work for our staff when they should be concentrating more on serving our community. So I just summarised that with more work, more cost, less control. Would anyone else like to speak to this? Councillor Gary?
Kia ora, thank you. This is a real mixed bag, and I welcome the natural hazards and emergencies aspect of this, and it must be particularly difficult for staff when they're put in the position that Mr. Friedland described, particularly when we think of the weather event last October and expecting more. And yesterday we had another potential emergency. To be put in that position just cannot continue. So that's a positive. A negative, though, for me, there are several negatives here, and excluding elected members has to be one of them. From those SSPP, I think it's SPP, isn't it? Panels is not acceptable at all. For me, the limited consultation period is a real problem. We have these submissions coming at us, these consultations coming at us, right, left and centre, very little time to canvass our community's opinion, stakeholders' opinion, and very little time for us to feed in. But I applaud the staff for their efficiency in this regard and their work on this. And I'd make the comment that faster isn't necessarily better. Fast track is sometimes appropriate, but faster isn't necessarily better in every case. I do believe the infrastructure and energy theme and the paragraph 6 in the letter around the 35-year consent period for renewable energy and long-lived infrastructure is a positive. So again, that's one good thing. But on the negative side, the cost of a potential review of the district plan is ridiculous. We keep being inundated with more cost through these decisions of government. So I would ask that when it comes to the hearing, that accompanying the Mayor, we have technical support from our staff, and I would hope that would happen because there are very technical aspects of this.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would also suggest that maybe the Chair might be a delegate that would be considered to speak on this, given her experience in planning in general. This is really the first of a series of bills that are coming towards us, and it doesn't really have, this is what I'd call the tidy up bill. So it has the positives and a few negatives in it as it sorts some things out. But you might get a sense of where it's going with the SPP and the exclusion of elected members from those panels. As we pointed out, it's actually no impact on us because we've never used that process, but it's an indicator that either DIA or the government is trying to do what it has been doing a lot of recently, which is removing local government and local government decision makers from decision making. So I think we've just got to keep watching this space. And I do think, I'm just a bit worried about, I understand the idea of putting your consent period out for 35 years for energy, but I do point out that's 1990. Something could have been issued. And there's a lot of technological change that goes on in those 35 years, so I'm wondering if we've swung a little bit far in the other direction in terms of that. I mean, 5 to 10 years to get something out is too short, but 35 years might leave you with something which is way out of date by the time you end up putting it into place. Really, though, I say look forward to the next set of legislations that's coming, and in the approach of setting these submissions in, we'll send submissions into bills that maybe not be that contentious. So we've been in the dialogue for what's coming next, because I think the big ones that are coming next will be the big district plans that are regional, that will take a huge amount of control out of our day-to-day. So this is the planning equivalent of Three Waters. It's come out of a previous government, it's been dressed up again by another government, but the common theme in both cases has been the removal of local control, and people in Wellington know better when it comes to the design, which is something that we will have to be staunch about as this goes forward. Thank you.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In a similar vein, I see the direction of these proposals as being contrary to the best interests of our citizens and communities generally. And in many ways, I think they reflect a lack of awareness of what's actually happening on the ground, and I guess the doctrinaire belief that it's all wrong and needs fixing. What we have is a system that for a number of years has required expert, trained local knowledge to be part of that system. We've used that, I think, responsibly, often use independent consultants as part of our consenting processes, and I'm not aware of bad outcomes locally. And part of that is because local knowledge is directly involved, as well as appropriate professional training around the requirements and the objectivity necessary to hear such matters. I don't think what's proposed is going to yield anything better, let alone faster necessarily. And I agree that the spectre of a wider amalgamation and alignment of different disparate communities into a similar template is something that is actually not achievable, but certainly won't yield positive results.
Thank you, everyone. I think after Councillor Benson talked, I thought a death by 1,000 cuts, and I think that's why we have to be extremely vigilant when we are having all of these bills come through. Councillor O'Malley certainly talked about that the spectre of talked about the spectre of amalgamation, and Councillor O'Malley brought that up too, about the threat of a regional plan, and I think that we are very concerned about the loss of localism, and Councillor Gary certainly talked about the cost of the review of the district plan and faster not necessarily being better, and I think we have to pay attention to what the government are doing, because we bear the brunt of it, and a loss of local voice would just be something terrible if we don't have any say in our community. So we have had all the speakers, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Abstentions? That is carried. We'll move on to item 8, the Residents' Opinion Survey, and welcome to the table Ms Moran and Ms Wesley Smith. Kia ora koutou. Do you have any opening comments?
Kia ora, Madam Chair. No opening comments. We're happy to take questions.
Just have one question for a start. I see that the current contract extension expires, and then the procurement for the open market contract is underway. And I just wonder whether council was, or what would be the process if council was to choose to change any of the questions. Is the procurement process just for someone to do the work rather than the content?
There is the potential to refresh the questions, I think, as noted on point 7, kind of implies, but maybe is not implicitly clear. But yes, there is the opportunity.
Thank you. And my other question was, just why there was a lower number of response. So I use this paragraph 20, which talks about the higher margin of error due to a lower response number, and I guess my thinking was that I thought that the people who are contracted to do it have to get the numbers of people. So was there a reason why do you think that they didn't quite reach that number?
I couldn't confidently say why people have or haven't chosen to respond to the survey. The only point that I could really make around point 20 is the margin of error is quite high when it is below 1,000. So when you've got over 1,000 respondents, then you reduce that margin of error down. That's all I can say. Sorry.
Thank you. And have the Quality of Life survey was released recently, and I note that it's now up on the website and that we did a media release for it. Because there's quite a lot of good news in it, does it come to council officially, or is it just part of the annual report?
So previously we haven't taken that to council, but it has been shared with councillors for them to review.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Thank you. Do you want to move it? Okay. Councillor Gill has indicated he would like to move it, and I will second it. Would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, yes. Although the government has expressed a lack of understanding as to why we might want to hear from the residents through something such as the ROS, and I'm sure that some councillors may feel the need to traverse the same questioning as has happened in the past as to its worth. As has been mentioned today, and at every occasion that we have had the ROS report presented, the ROS is a monitoring tool. It's utilised by the DCC to collect statistically reliable information. It is a snapshot in time, an indicator on the feeling of the residents in Dunedin, and while, for example, numbers 40 and 20 comment about the changes in overall satisfaction, be it up or down, are not statistically significant, it is the trends over time that I find interesting and telling. It is also, let's not forget, one of the few direct ways that many residents have of being heard, or at least feeling as they're being heard, and if we don't take it seriously, then it is surely only a feeling. So for those reasons, I'm pleased to see it, and I'm happy to see the patterns that emerge. While some may not see the benefit in it, I for one do, and so I'm very happy to move this.
If there's no one else that wishes to speak, I want to speak about this as well. It's great to see the Residents' Opinion survey coming through, just to keep that finger on the pulse. And I brought up the Quality of Life survey, and I don't think that it got a little bit of attention, but I don't think it gets enough attention. The Quality of Life survey goes right throughout New Zealand, and the sample size is 6,194. If you're interested in margins of error, it's 1.5% for New Zealand and 4% for Dunedin. I guess that I wanted to talk about this because Dunedin was a stellar standout with this. We had the number one for quality of life with 83%, number one of the cities for happy with the city look and feel at 59%, number one feel safe in the city centre after dark 50%, number one feel safe in the neighbourhood after dark 64%, and this was quite heartening to me. This number one, we were first equal with believe the public has at least some influence on council decision making. That's really important when we look at the statistics. We might think that the performance of the mayor and councillors at 32%, you just say, oh well, how's that? But actually that's pretty high compared to a lot of the other cities in New Zealand, because there is unfortunately falling trust in both central government, which does worse than local government, and so it's important for us to actually feel good about those figures. We were number two with people that think that their city is a great place to live, and number two with satisfaction with work-life balance. So I just want to call attention, I guess, to the importance of actually getting out and surveying our people, and this is the very thick Quality of Life survey, but it has some really, really important stuff in it. I think that actually tells us more about our community that we are serving as well. So with that, thank you staff for your work on the ROS survey and for bringing it to us, and I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Abstentions? That is carried. We shall move on to the zero carbon update, and welcome. I've got Mr. Scott McLean and Ms. Ginty McTavish to speak to the report. Kia ora koutou. Do you have any opening remarks? Okay, we shall move to questions. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, and I'll just ask this one question because I have to leave the meeting unfortunately for a while. Around the business pilot, Ms. McTavish, and I noticed, and I just haven't got it in front of me, the particular paragraph, but you'll remember it, around the extension to not-for-profits. And I just wondered what is the process? I didn't quite understand the process from here on in. I understood that you got feedback, you'd refined the process, but can you tell us about how organisations get involved with that, please?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Councillor. The call went out a few days ago, a press release, which I believe the chair had a quote in. Unfortunately, it wasn't picked up by the ODT, but it would be great to get a bit more coverage for that. We've also been pushing it on socials, DCC socials, and there will be another push next week. We've reached out to our partners, to Zero Carbon Alliance, Business South, with a request to disseminate through their networks. But if councillors have other ideas about how to reach businesses or organisations that might be interested in this opportunity, we'd be really keen to hear from them.
Thank you. And I did see the press release. And so how will you select? Is it a matter, it's what I wasn't sure about, you select a variety. How will you do that?
If we were oversubscribed, we would prioritise based on two things. The commitment to emissions reduction if they have previously demonstrated that, but more primarily the potential for emissions reduction from that type of business. So mindful of Council's direction recently to focus on emissions reduction bang for buck, we would extend that to the prioritisation of these businesses. Obviously, without diving deep into the data, it will be an assessment based on the type of business that they have rather than a deep understanding of their data.
Finally, on that, I noticed in the feedback some of the organisations didn't have data collection and had difficulty collecting it. And for many organisations, they don't know where to start with this process. So that's all been taken into account as you move forward to the next pilot?
Yes, they are supported by the supplier to do that work. So it is a bespoke one-on-one approach that we're taking with this for that very reason. Different organisations have different capacity, different knowledge base, different challenges around things like data. But there is no real way around the fact that we need data in order to quantify emissions and identify emissions reduction opportunities. So finding a way to navigate that is the emphasis. Yeah. For particularly small organisations, we may be able to do it without data using kind of a hotspot approach, and that is part of this next pilot.
Thank you very much.
Can I just follow up on the businesses? So I understand that there's a meeting next week with tourism operators. So is that one of the areas that is being targeted for support for carbon emissions?
That is correct. There is, as councillors know, we work as closely as we can with teams across the organisation to advance mutual goals. The destination management plan has an emphasis on supporting operators and ultimately development of a climate change strategy for the sector. We have teamed up with Sean and with Dunedin Host to offer an opportunity specifically to the tourism sector next week. If we can get a significant number of them on board, then that will be a start for them in terms of building a picture of their sector emissions.
So the business support, previously I had gone through tourism and there was a charge to be part of the program, so now there is no charge to be part of the program, is that correct?
So we looked at the previous work that was done by Enterprise Dunedin using COVID money, I think, from MB, and discussed the feedback that was received through that program. The reason we have taken the approach that we have with the bespoke targeted free work is that it enables them to get to the point that they have an idea of their emissions and a plan to reduce them without any cost. If they then wanted to formally certify or verify their emissions or report their emissions or get some other form of stamp, they would need to do their own work to come up with or to identify the certification scheme that they wanted to. But the tools that we leave them with at the point that they exit the program here would enable them to understand their emissions and to take first steps to reduce their emissions without further investment.
I'm just pleased to hear it was free, because and this might be technical, do you know if Qualmark, which is the industry certification, and they have a Qualmark kind of green, are they doing some of that work as well? If you don't know, that's fine. I'll just
I'm not familiar with Qualmark's activity. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I ask, what do you see the impact will be of the motion to not have a high or medium level of carbon zero investment on our 9-year plan?
So I think that was set out in the report that Council received on January 28th, the implications of that.
Can you just specify what some of them might be?
If I may, staff are updating the model at the moment, so we'll bring that back to council. I think in May was the request, so we'll have a more fuller picture then.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the report. As ever, depressing as some of it is. I was interested around the information around the cruise ships emissions, and thank you. Am I right in reading that there is a little bit of there are a number of questions around the methodology around this? I'm looking at it was 40, 41, and 42 in the paper. And I think you're saying 42 is climate science and methodologies continue to evolve over time, more detailed information. So can you just maybe unpick that a wee bit? Am I misreading that or? Yeah.
No, that's fine. So cruise emissions, the reason why cruise has not been included in the inventory right from the word go is simply lack of data availability at the time, and kind of a lack of a standardised methodology. The helpful things have moved on since 2018-19. There are a number of authorities, councils that are now looking to do this. So Christchurch was kind of first off the rank, worked with a supplier to develop a cruise footprint. Wellington then followed, improved on that methodology and the data sources. We have then followed that. So there has been an iterative process to improve the methodology and the data sources. The methodology that we in Wellington have used is GPC compliant and is aligned with the rest of our footprint, so it means we can include it in our footprint. However, there is still a lack of data. If more data were available on individual boats, basically, then this could be improved on. However, the supplier, I spoke with him as recently as yesterday, he said it's around the margins really for the purposes of what we want this for, which is getting a sense of the size of this footprint relative to everything else in our footprint. He said that's around the margins. You've got what you need, which is a snapshot of roughly how big that is relative to the rest of your emissions pie.
Thank you. And in terms of the import emissions, and for those of us like myself who have to breathe nitrogen oxide and sulfur oxides in Port Chalmers, I presume that's more a national level legislative issue around what ships can do in port, because currently they're not breaking any New Zealand laws by idling in port, are they?
Look, anything other than carbon is not my area of expertise. Okay. I do know that Port has looked at cold ironing and jointly with Aurora, that was an action that we looked at in our emissions reduction plan. Yeah, I understand there is some capacity. Yeah, so.
Thank you.
Councillor Benson-Pipe.
Thank you. I'd just like to come back to the earlier question. The report you referred to is one that Council saw earlier in the week.
The report that I referred to in response to Councillor Houlihan's question was the 28th January report where we talked about the various investment packages.
Okay, but earlier this week at Council we had let me say first of all thank you for your reports and work, and I think most of us appreciate how lucky we are to have a woman of your expertise in this area. But that said, that report makes it quite clear that because of the council decision referred to, we are not going to meet our carbon zero, net zero 2030 target. Is that correct?
You're referring to the SFA's, the Significant Forecasting Assumptions report that was brought last week, yes. Yes, so that report updated the SFAs that were presented to you, I think in October, as a result of two key decisions. The first was governments the publication of government's emissions reduction plan, its second emissions reduction plan, which was not available in October, and it is clear that the level of government appetite and investment in this area is not what would be necessary to support achievement of a net zero carbon target for the city. And the other decision that was key to that SFA's update was Council's decision around the packages. So we have incorporated, done an assessment of what is achievable in terms of the target. I would say a provisional assessment, because we still are updating our modelling. We will bring back full advice in May. However, at this point in time, it is looking unlikely that under the government and council investment context that target is achievable.
Thank you. I think this is important, and I'm sorry to tease it out, but a lot of people out there are very unhappy about the council decision, as you'll be aware, and I want people to have a clear understanding of the situation as they write their submissions, which we will no doubt receive in due course. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just sense check that, or just check in the report that we had in December on page 205, paragraph 19. I appreciate that you don't have it in front of you, but there's a paragraph here that says, at the DCC scale, based on modelling completed in 2023, it is possible that the DCC's organisational target can be achieved with projects that are in draft budgets alone. So I'm just trying to understand, was that written before the government changed its policies, or was it written as it stood in December?
So just to clarify, the response that I provided to Councillor Benson-Pope refers to the city scale, the targets at the city scale. The paragraph that you've referred to refers to projects and targets at the organisational scale, at the DCC scale. So in terms of the DCC scale and achievement of those targets, our assessment is that under current conditions, current government and council investment context, it is possible that target will still be achieved. That's the language that we used. In terms of the SFAs, we couldn't say possible. It's not possible to say possible. You have to choose either it's likely that it will be achieved or it's likely that it won't be achieved, and then you use your certainty, high, medium, low, to demonstrate your certainty around that. So the team last week presented to you and you adopted a position that says for the DCC targets, let me get the wording right, it is assumed that the DCC will meet its organisational targets, but the uncertainty on that is high, and that reflects the fact that we think it is possible. We are still yet to complete the modelling, and as set out in the report that was presented to you on 28th of January, investment in the high and medium packages would increase the probability of that target being achieved.
Thank you. One of the other things I just wanted to, I think we've got a report here from the Zero Carbon Alliance, is that all of the partners need to take part to achieve the city goals. So I just wonder, have all of the partners themselves got or are meeting targets for zero carbon in their organisations? I read some of it and I saw that the university, for example, had something in there, but it didn't really have if they were achieving their targets or not. So sorry, Councillor Hurleen's got her hand up. So I just wonder if that affects that probability as well as the other members doing what they can do.
Yes, the zero carbon plan and the modelling that was set out in the zero carbon plan in terms of the target was very clear that it required all actors to pull all levers available as hard as credibly possible to achieve that citywide target. We don't have direct line of sight to every organisation and how every organisation is tracking. We will be doing a Zero Carbon Alliance internal sort of update snapshot in April. We'll have a bit more of a sense of that then, but certainly Zero Carbon Alliance is not the only entity either. I mean, it literally, the city plan, the Zero Carbon Plan is, it carves out and speaks to the DCC role in that, and that is what you asked us to develop investment packages to reflect, which we did, but that is just the DCC, right? There are many actors, and central government from the perspective of the DCC is probably the key one in that, which is why we've placed emphasis on that in our analysis.
So I also see that Business South, as requested, have been invited to be a member. Have they responded to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, they're going to be considering it at their board meeting on the 28th of this month.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Now I have quite a list of questions. I've got Deputy Mayor Lucas, Councillor Wiley, Councillor Wetherill, Councillor Houlihan and Councillor Benson-Pope. Councillor Wiley, I'm aware that you might have to leave early. Oh, okay. Thank you. So we'll go to Deputy Mayor Lucas.
This wasn't my question, but in follow-up from Councillor Benson-Pope and Councillor Barker. So if I go back to the January 28 meeting in the report that we're referring to, in that report, it states in that the city scale, the high and medium packages would support emissions reductions and provide other benefits for the community. However, preliminary indications from modelling are that in the updated context, it is unlikely either package will bring about the degree of change at pace required to achieve the city's 2030 target. So I'm just, and it's probably following on from Councillor Barker, I'm just trying to get confirmation, and I understand you're going to come back in May, that still is your thinking there.
Certainly, and Council's decision around the investment packages as a result of that package, as a result of that decision, that provides, I'd say, further certainty around that statement.
Okay, thank you. My question actually was to do with the, back further with the business pilot projects. So the 7-month follow-up hasn't yet been completed on the first company. So when is that likely to be done? Again, I guess that is to see what they've done since. Is that, yeah?
Yeah, that's correct. I would need to get back to you on that. It's later this year, but I'm not sure the month.
So you're about to start the next pilot. So I guess what I would like to know is, from these pilots, how do you see that rolling out into, the whole business community? Because obviously you can't do one-on-ones with every business in the community. So I mean, the idea of the pilot is obviously to come up with a template. Or I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'd like to know what happens next in terms of from the pilots.
Yeah. So we are hoping through these pilots to learn how we can most efficiently but still effectively achieve some support for business. The approaches that have previously been taken have been workshop-based approaches where a number of businesses have been involved in a single workshop or series of workshops. Now that is efficient in terms of investment, but did not prove to be effective for reasons that Councillor Barker has alluded to. So we are piloting a different approach. This is an approach that has been used elsewhere, or iterates off an approach that has been used elsewhere. We would hope through this to identify there may be opportunities to bring together, for example, with the Dunedin host approach, there may be opportunities to bring together really similar businesses and do something efficient and effective within a membership body, for example.
Yes, maybe sector-based.
That's right. So we're piloting this Dunedin host thing in part because of that. That will teach us something. We're also, as you can see, as set out in the report, we're tweaking the approach that we've had based on that, the first round of feedback.
Yeah.
So it is iterative, and we would hope to have a better sense of it after this next round.
And I guess that was my question about the second lot of feedback, that obviously you'll need to feed into the pilot. If 7 months down the track nothing's happened, then obviously, see something about the pilot. Okay, no, thank you.
Councillor Wiley.
Just a question through to you, the Chair. I'm conscious of all the questions being asked of Ms McTavish around the decision at the January 28th council meeting. And I don't see any of that commentary in this report. And I'm just going, are we going to relitigate the 28th January's decision, or are we going to focus on what's in our report? it's a positive and a negative of it.
I'll just adjourn for a second and take some advice. Thank you.
you.
I seconded Councillor Gilbert. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Everyone, I think that I am fairly relaxed about people asking questions. However, I do ask people not to relitigate the decision taken. I understand that it does have a lens on this, but this report was actually due back in December, wasn't it? I think that Mr. McLean sent us an email about the news and the report then, and we'll also note that the report is also ends in June 2024. And I guess I could just ask a question about that, is given that we are how many months into the financial year, 8 months into the financial year, are we still measuring and tracking well on these, or is it that we do an annual measurement?
The work is done basically on a 6-month basis, or it's not entirely true. We input data as it comes in, but we kind of try to take a snapshot every 6 months. Otherwise, we would just be literally only doing that as a team. So we hope to bring you a 6-month snapshot as to where things are tracking within the next 6 weeks.
So do you kind of have like a live thing, a live model going on that you input data in when you say that you could do a snapshot?
We have an emissions platform, a software program that data from the organisation is fed into to provide snapshots. Yeah, but it does require on the data all having arrived, and when it is reliant on a number of third parties to deliver, sometimes that takes longer than it's not instant. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Did you? I think you had questions.
Going to the focus around cruise and the impact on carbon emissions, and looking through the report, and thank you for answering the questions and sending those around to all the other councillors, and noting that that Milford Sound plays a role for reducing our carbon emissions from port to port in that flow through. My question is, how does it differ between a cruise ship and a container ship with the emissions created in the port?
Created in the port, or sorry,
well,
can you clarify?
So we see the impact of cruise on New Zealand. What is the impact on sea freight or container ships on New Zealand? And I don't see that anywhere mentioned as in the impact on Dunedin.
So the marine element, the marine freight element of movements in and out of Port Chalmers or Port Otago has always been part of our footprint. That emissions footprint was always calculated. The missing piece was the cruise piece. So basically, this just completes the picture of the movements, the impact of vessel movements in and out of Port Otago.
Okay.
Is that your question?
So, yeah, so that, because I've got a follow-up question for that. So Dunedin takes on board the emissions, so DCC or this Dunedin as a city takes on the emissions for a container ship coming in and out of Port Otago.
The same methodology is used for freight, marine freight, as is described for cruise, also for aviation and for rail. So, yeah.
Okay, so in Christchurch, in their report, unlike marine freight where emissions are allocated across the Canterbury region, cruise ship emissions are 100% allocated to Christchurch where the benefits are experienced. So that tells me that Christchurch is spreading the load across the region of a container vessel, but you've just said that Dunedin absorbs all the impact of a container vessel.
So under the GPC methodology, there are various different approaches that can be taken. That approach, I don't know how Christchurch came to that, whether they've mutually agreed that with their other TLAs or whether they have adopted that approach in conversation with other TLAs. But yeah, essentially, I think that they have taken a slightly different approach under the GPC methodology. If that were something that Council wished to pursue, then we could look into and provide advice on that, or at least look at what Christchurch has done and how it has done that.
Okay, I will come back to that question because I understood it came from the same consultants that did this report, but I'll take some time to look at that and come back with other questions. Thank you.
I'll just hop in while we're on cruise. I thought we had a figure about what it would cost to put in shore power. Do we have that? I mean, it was in the tens of millions of dollars. 100, okay. So somebody had asked me about that prior to the meeting. And the next thing is that we are measuring the cruise emissions and how it affects the city. So in the next iteration of the Carbon Zero plan, will there be a way that we will be looking to address those emissions? I'm thinking about the way that Cruise New Zealand works, trying to lobby for government changes, etc., etc. Will that, because now we're measuring them, how do we address them?
So certainly, so some of the actions that already sit within the plan in terms of advocacy would address this. There are the actions that we identified in terms of marine freight from memory relate primarily to advocacy and to support of any third parties to explore, implement if possible, cold ironing or onshore power, and the advocacy piece. So that would be the approach, I guess, that sits within the zero carbon plan at this point in time. Whether or not there were additional actions ultimately comes up to the will of council. You guys are the ones that approve the actions, so we would, I guess, workshop that with you, workshop options with you. You would make decisions about what you wanted to do. Ultimately, if council wishes to achieve an emissions reduction target, gross emissions reductions need to be made, and so there is no way around that. We can't plant our way out of the problem, and so they need to come from somewhere. So what sector that is up to council. We can provide advice on that, but not make decisions.
Yeah. So just looking at the Zero Carbon Alliance, the ORC are in there, the Otago Regional Council, who own Port Otago, and I guess I'm getting to what role does Port Otago, have they been consulted or played any role in actually looking what cruise emissions are affecting the city? I know there's the Cruise Action Plan, which they're part of, but are they somehow inputting into the Zero Carbon Alliance through the ORC managing Port Otago to look at this issue?
So we have an action in our plan around advocacy to the Otago Regional Council on this. I just literally this morning presented to the Cruise Action Group on this work, and I think now that the baseline is known, there would be an opportunity to present that directly to the ORC and other. I think ORC was there present this morning, but through the alliance, through other mechanisms to discuss opportunities. there has also been discussion about potential for the Zero Carbon Alliance to open up to other entities, and and so there may be a mechanism there as well.
So just because it was a bit challenging to get Business South onto the Zero Carbon Alliance, would we re-look at the terms of reference possibly for that group, which everyone signed up to make it easier? Because obviously, if everybody wants to do this as a city, we need all of the partners in, and it was a little challenging to try and get Business South in. Is that being looked at as an easier way to try and get everybody on board?
Zero Carbon Alliance, the terms of reference were approved by every governing body in the alliance. So changing the terms of reference is not a quick fix, I would say, for anything really. The terms of reference, Business South clearly meet the terms of reference meet the criteria under the terms of reference. It allows for membership bodies. It also allows for large emitters that have ambitious emissions reduction targets, which is science aligned, or large employers in the Dunedin context. So there's a range of avenues for membership for parties to join. The thing is that it does need to be mutually agreed between all partners, and early in the alliance's days, it felt like there was a lot of work to do to get solid processes and momentum for the group before it was opened up. So I think the group is now at a place where those processes have been developed, and opening up to a wider group of members that meet those existing criteria is something that is being actively pursued.
Thank you. Councillor Weatherall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following on from Councillor Wiley's questions, I have a question around the strength of the data around cruise ship emissions and where they're calculated from, because I take it through this report it says basically halfway across the Tasman, averaged out by the amount of ports they stop at, and it goes on our figures for Dunedin. And I question really how fair that is on Dunedin's targets or our figures that are in this report. And is there any calculations done on cruise ships emissions or all ships emissions within our waters, within our harbour, basically, which would go on to our figures? Not the fact that they're going from TY Point past our harbour entrance going up to Wellington or whatever. It doesn't. Where do these figures and these emissions, where does it stop? How it just affects Dunedin? Because to me, I don't think these figures are fair at all. I think they should be, as Councillor Walker said, he has trouble breathing in Port Chalmers sometimes when there's a cruise ship in port. But I don't think you'd have the same problems when it's just going past the entrance of our harbour.
Thank you, Councillor. So the methodology that is used very, very widely across New Zealand and globally for city and regional emissions inventories. It does differ to the approach that's taken for organisations or for others, but this methodology is standard for cities and for regions. I think your question about would it be possible to look at what's within our harbour only, that work was done as part of this footprint that can be reported to you, but it wouldn't meet the definition of the GPC methodology for the purposes of reporting.
So you're saying basically that if it was recorded from within our waters, within our harbour, the percentages would be a lot less?
Certainly the at-sea component of the emissions is a significant chunk of the emissions profile. So if I refer you to, is it in here? Yeah, the graph on page 46 of the agenda, you'll see that it's split into 3 different types of emissions. So travel to and from the destination is the top piece. The piece in port is the majority of the emissions within the harbour. There would probably be a little bit of that to from destination piece that sits on top of that, that would be within the harbour. But as staff, we work to the zero carbon policy. Zero carbon policy says that we will produce an inventory that is aligned with methodologies that enable us to report according to the process that council has defined. And if we just reported that piece, it wouldn't be compliant.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In reference to the comments that were made earlier, I think, by the Chair about other organisations and what they're doing and whether they're meeting their targets and things, isn't it, given the council claimed, we declared a climate emergency and we made the ambitious goal of 2030, isn't it up to us to set an example?
Point of order.
Yes.
The council is asking staff to answer a question that should be asked by politicians.
I am a politician, I am asking the
Now, I'm just going to uphold
Answer
the
cannot
point
be given by staff.
I'm just going to uphold the point of order because we generally don't ask staff for their opinion on things. We ask them to respond to questions on the report. So do you have any other questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'm just wondering, am I allowed to ask if we need to set an example?
In terms of the zero carbon plan, the zero carbon plan has sets out the different roles for council. It speaks to the importance of council leadership, and so to that effect, council demonstrating leadership is helpful. I guess in adopting the plan, council also adopted a plan that spoke to the various other roles that council could have. The community, through the feedback process that we did around the zero carbon plan, spoke to those various roles that they saw council having an important role in. Obviously, there are varying degrees of that, and council, what degree of leadership council wishes to take is a matter for council.
Thank you.
If I may, I might dive in there, and Ms McTavish covered it before, but the zero carbon plan sets out really clearly that all players need to pull all levers as hard as possible. So that's DCC can't do it alone, and that's including some government players inside and outside the Zero Carbon Alliance and other. It's essentially everybody, and our sphere of influence is relatively low in places. But to the question that was asked before about the Zero Carbon Alliance members, I'm certainly happy to take an action to ask the other partners in the alliance if they have pulled their levers as hard as possible, to get a real sense, because the alliance recognises that each organisation that's part of it is an independent organisation and has its own challenges essentially, and operates independently. So, but I'm happy to take that as an action if the committee wishes.
Thank you. Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you. And what you've just said, Mr. McLean, fits perfectly with my question, because whether it's Zero Carbon Alliance parties or businesses that have been chatted to, helped with the pilots and further pilots and so on, it seems inevitable to me that in the context of the council not having put its money where its mouth is, those conversations must be compromised.
Point of order, Mr. Benson-Pope. The council has put its money where it's. I'm going to call. I think it's 25.2.d, and I think you're going to have to rule on it, which is misrepresentation of a statement, because council has invested a lot of money in the zero carbon plan, a lot of money, a lot of time. So I'll leave you to rule on that.
Chair, in the context of council not having committed funds to the level that would ensure a more likely meeting of our zero carbon targets, surely that act and situation must compromise our conversations with other parties.
The staff have conveyed Council's decision to Zero Carbon Alliance members and made them aware of the process to provide feedback. So,
when would you expect that feedback?
We've made them aware that there'll be a public consultation process that they can participate in should they wish to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. Just going back to the previous questions I asked, the clarification, Ms McTavish, so you're aware, actually the report I was quoting was the ACOM report presented to Ototari Christchurch Greenhouse Gas Emissions Inventory Financial Year 23, which was published on the 1st of February 2024, where it talks about and I can send you the link for that, but I'm sure you've already got it. It was 3.2.1 was the piece, and I know you've got staff listening, so they'll go looking at it, where it talked about the impact of international shipping on Christchurch and how that has spread across the region. So my understanding, this is where the question is, so my understanding from what you've said is currently right now Dunedin absorbs all the freight emissions from international shipping, where Christchurch has it spread across a wider region.
The report that you cite, I think, is the one that I sent you last night. Is that right?
I'd found it previously, yes.
Yeah. So, yes, that is an approach that. So ACOM is the same supplier that, and I assume that Christchurch has taken a GPC compliant approach, although they haven't for their cruise emissions. So I would need to check that. I would need to check whether they are GPC compliant for marine, which is why I can't provide you a comment on that today. If it is GPC compliant, then that would be an approach that council could choose to take for, if it is. Council could take that approach and still be consistent with your policy. I don't know the approach that Christchurch took, whether whether it's GPC compliant, and B, whether they have done that in consultation with their with others in the region, because you would hope that those emissions were being picked up on someone's footprint. So otherwise they're just not being counted. Mm-hmm. So we can look into that. We can have some discussions with our colleagues in Christchurch and find out those two things, and then come back to you with advice should that be something that either the advisory group or the advisory panel or the committee would like to hear.
Okay. Now, you presented to the cruise action plan group this morning. One of the things, how did that go? What feedback did you get from that?
Was fine. I had to do it remote, unfortunately, because I had to come straight to this meeting. So I wasn't able to be in the room, but I did extend the invitation for any follow-up questions to come through. And it is actually an action in the cruise action plan to do this work. And we have worked with Port Otago on it. They've supplied a bunch of the data. So I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that this work has been done. So I guess doors are open, dialogue's open.
Okay, perfect. Now, when we look at the cruise ship numbers from 1718 to 1920, on average we had 120 ships. For the 23-24 year, we had 118 ships. For this financial year, for 24-25 year, this financial year, we're going to have 95, and 25-26 and 26-27, they're budgeting or predicting 85 ships. So really, when we look at a lot of the data that we see here, we're going to see by default of the number of ships coming and the improvement of the quality of ships, at least a 25 to 30% plus reduction anyway, correct?
That is correct. Without knowing the detail of the cruise ship methodology, wishing Rory was here, but yeah, my understanding is that it's a function of the type of ship, the vessel cruising speed, the distance it travels, the time in port. So, you know, all those things being factored in, if numbers are dropping and the type of ships and et cetera, are the same year on year, then yes, we would expect to see a commensurate drop in emissions.
Okay, thank you. A slightly different question, and one I've actually asked you previously, but I'm still perplexed by it. On page 98 of our report, and it talks about business travel emissions. And one of the things that still confuses me, and I just want clarification, and I've actually heard this from some staff across the organisation. There's a comment in here, using alternative travel modes where possible, such as carpooling to and from Christchurch, where multiple staff are attending the same event or meeting. So there's a 2-day conference in Christchurch. You're suggesting that we have staff basically be out of the office for 4 days, a day to travel up and a day to travel back, and 2 days to attend. And is that where council policy is going, versus actually flying staff to Christchurch to attend a 2-day conference? Is it getting that strict around flying versus using electric vehicles?
No, Councillor, to be honest, I think this is a level of detail that probably isn't necessary or useful in this particular action. I think it's just intended to be an example of something that could be weighed up as a possibility. It's certainly not council policy. Yeah, I'm sure the Chief Executive or GM could speak better to that. But
yeah, thank you, Councillor. Through the budget setting process, we look at staff travel budgets and training and conferences. And the first question we expect staff to ask themselves is, do I need to attend this in person? There are a lot of training opportunities and conferences that you can attend virtually, so that factors in. But also staff welfare and efficiency and all of that sort of thing. It also comes into play. So, you know, one of our critical risks is driving, for example. So, you know, we think about all of those sorts of things, but no, there's not a hard and fast rule that everyone needs to pile into an EV and travel to Christchurch if there's a more efficient way of doing it. So there's a range of factors that come into play.
Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you. Going back to the business support pilot, and I will preface this by saying that my business was one of the ones that was part of the pilot, whilst I had absolutely nothing to do with it, attended none of it. That was my wife and the team. So I have absolutely no personal knowledge of, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, but my question is, with the pilots and the next one as well, it seems to me that many of the people who will put their hands up and be interested in are often well on their path down the sustainability path in terms of their business, some further than others, but generally well down it. And so my question is around if you're using the phrase bang for buck, it seems to be throwing around today, if we use the bang for buck, is it not better to get people who haven't started their journey or are in their infancy, as it were, because surely otherwise it's more or less preaching to the choir? Mm. So has any learning been done from the first pilot as to how we get people who haven't started yet and to make more of an impact?
Mm. It's a great question, Councillor.
Thank you, I thought so.
I think the challenge, there is a challenge reaching individuals, businesses for whom this is not a point of interest. So any help, I would preface my comments by saying any help that you can provide as a team of councillors, of governors, to help us reach those people, we would really be very grateful for. The first pilot, by its very nature, we reached out to people that we knew would be interested, because there's no point in failing with a really significant disinterested person and doing reputational damage, right? So the testing ground for that first pilot was probably not what we would target going forward. With this next phase, now that we've done some learning, we're being a bit more ambitious about who we want to reach. We want to reach more, and you're right, we want to reach businesses that perhaps are less engaged. And we will learn more about how to do that as we go ahead. The most important thing, I think, or we feel that the pilot, or this work does several things for the council. Firstly, it is a door opener for and a way of spreading the word about zero carbon and the ambitions of the program and the council. That doesn't involve just trumpeting the target, so if we're talking about how we can support your business, we also talk a bit about the target. We also talk a bit about the journey that the city's on, without that just being the sole point of the conversation. So it's important from that perspective. It is also important from the perspective of targeting businesses that have larger emissions profiles, and that will be our primary. If we are oversubscribed, that will be our primary drive. We'll be saying, well, okay, are you you're a courier company, you drive lots, or do you have a big boiler out the back that's burning LPG or coal, or do you consume lots of diesel, or whatever reason, produce lots of waste, organic waste? Those will be the sort of businesses that we would say, right, well, obviously you're tranche one. We want to prioritise you. Where we do want to see a little bit of emphasis is, have you made some sort of commitment, or can you show us that you are interested in pursuing this? Because there's no point in council working with a business that has absolutely no interest or no motivation to move forward with any emissions reduction work following the free piece, because otherwise we're just sinking good money into something that won't go anywhere. So the bit about, are you interested? We would like to work with businesses that demonstrate some form of interest in progressing to the point they've taken action.
In terms of showing some interest, are we just talking about, careful Kevin, is it actions or words? So some businesses will have in their strategic plan or their mission statement or whatever, they'll make comment about. And there are others that actually may not even say it, but are sort of tapping away slightly. So is it commitment by word or commitment by deed?
Good question. I would need to check in with my colleague about how they anticipate judging that. Again, I wouldn't say that is going to be if you have a really large emitting business, or business with potential significant emissions reduction savings that hasn't maybe got a strategic commitment, then I don't think that you would say we won't work with them. And to be honest, frankly, I would be stoked to be in a position where we are oversubscribed. It may not even be an issue. So if we're in that position, I'll check in with my colleague and get back to you on a response on that.
Deputy Mayor Lucas.
So just following up a little bit on that. So how do we pick up, in terms of measuring the citywide emissions, when somebody, like, I'll use this as an example, the Ravensbourne fertiliser plant, Ravensdown fertiliser plant at Ravensbourne closes, okay, so I would imagine that they are a significant emitter. So, and I imagine they probably had never measured their emissions. So how do we now pick up the fact that as a city, our emissions have severely reduced? I'm just using this as a specific business example, because that, I'm sure, has had a huge impact on our citywide emissions.
So it shows up in different places, and the way that we collect our source data isn't, we don't go business to business, and we go to how much fuel is sold in the city, how many ship movements are there in the city, how many tons of coal, or we go to the source data. So when we do our inventory in 25, 26, there may be fewer truck movements, or there may be fewer ship movements, or there may be, and that's where it will show up. It won't be tagged with Ravensdown, but it will ultimately show up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My actual specific question was to do with the car share scheme. We should pick up, mention it in the work about the Zero Carbon Alliance. So I know as a council we talked a long time ago, maybe 18 months ago, about looking for a car share provider, and I've kind of followed other car share providers in the city. It seems to me it's a population is a real driver, and having key partners on board. So reading from here about the Zero Carbon Alliance, is one of the issues why they haven't come to the city is that we haven't necessarily got buy-in from the key parties, or we don't have sufficient population to make it sustainable.
So we worked under an MOU with a car share provider up until the middle of next year, understanding the conditions upon which they would establish in the city. What they said is they need, from the DCC, 10 car parking spaces. We put that up as an option in the medium and high investment options, waiving the revenue from 10 car parking spaces as an investment option. So council didn't take that option in January. But in terms of Zero Carbon Alliance partners, the car share provider factored in the contributions that those organisations could make in terms of car parking into the number 10, which was what the DCC was required to come to the table with.
Okay, I don't recall that. Thank you.
Just following up from the car share, so was that where it said that the OPEX would be $68,000 a year? So I guess was that seen as a cost rather than the money that we would lose through not having 10 car parks?
That's correct. It's the waived revenue from the car parks.
That makes sense now. Thank you. Councillor Hurleyhan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going back to the questions by Councillor Gilbert about the businesses and the initiatives of working with them and trying to get new businesses on board and the cost of that, with the change now in the City Council not having a high investment in carbon zero, will that impact on the money you've got to spend to incentivise new businesses to come in and invest some money with them around the carbon zero to try to help them on their journey to become carbon neutral? Does that limit the funds you'll have to do that?
So the Zero Carbon Business Support Program, at the scale that we are currently running it, we are able to do that again within our existing operational budget. Next year it's one of the only things that sits within our operational budget. Mm-hmm. There is no room to expand that within our operational budget. So we're aiming to work with about 40 businesses this year under phase 2 of the pilot. We could probably replicate that next year under the draft budget.
But there's no funds to expand it.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Can I just sense check that, because I have the options for the high package and the medium package in front of me. Neither the business support did not come to council as part of those packages, did it?
That is correct. The piece that would have been additional is that there would be additional work through the workplace, I'm forgetting the name exactly, the workplace travel planning work. We would have been working with more businesses there, and we would have, with the grants package subject to council support and working through that with businesses. We know that a small grant at the point of kind of handover on the plan for participating businesses or businesses that have identified significant emissions reduction potential would probably assist to enable carry through, both in terms of the workplace travel work and in terms of the zero carbon work. So those were the two pieces of the package that would have influenced that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. When we look across the whole report, is there any feel from the team about what the impact is going to be with the additional investment in infrastructure across the city over the as part of the long-term plan.
You mean in terms of impact on city emissions? The assessment, we did a line-by-line capital assessment looking at the impact. The vast majority of that infrastructure spend was assessed as neutral. Now, this doesn't mean no impact on emissions. This means a likely position where it doesn't increase emissions, but it doesn't decrease emissions. So we already have, as a city, a bunch of work happening, a bunch of infrastructure work happening. The net position, our assessment is, it's unlikely to go up or down as a result of the vast majority of that. There was then an assessment done of a small handful of projects, Shaping Futures, Dunedin Waste Futures, and a couple of other projects that we assessed would reduce emissions, ones that were in that 21 to 31 plan that had been continued on, that we assessed, well, that's likely to result in emissions reduction. So the Princes Street work, the Albany Street work, the Waste Futures program, and some other bits around the margins. Yeah. So, emissions, and I'll be upfront with council that it is difficult to project emissions at a citywide level. There are so many factors, central government policy changes on one thing and it can affect the outcomes, so, and then there's so many social effects. If you have a business community that's all talking to one another about this thing and celebrating the success of individual businesses that are cutting emissions, or we're getting on board with, innovative local products that are low emissions, or we've got communities getting really excited about their local waste depot, or, whatever it is, or even the tipping points that we see around active transport. So, you talk to experts at the university, they say you design a network for 14% of the population, you'll get 40% of the population because it's just a certain point at which it works for everybody, right? So those tipping points and those are very difficult to project, and that's why we'll come back to you in May with our very best effort at projections, updating the projections in the zero carbon plan. Okay, and when we look at aviation, and this was another question I asked you, was around the international flights to the Gold Coast will have a slight impact. I got a feeling that may be offset in some regards with the lack of, and our frustration with Air New Zealand reducing the flights that we will be getting to Dunedin, or the change of aircraft, especially the direct Auckland, Dunedin, or even Wellington, Dunedin jets. They will reduce the impact that we previously had. Is that a fair assumption? Yeah, that's correct. So the net effect of aviation, it's basically a sum total of where the aircraft are coming from, where they're going, how many of them, and the type of jet or type of fuel, type of jet, type of aircraft. So all of that goes into the mix, and we are working directly with Dunedin Airport to kind of look at their projections, and they've connected us with the carriers. So all of that will be brought back to you as part of that modelling as well. So by default, Air New Zealand is actually doing the carbon footprint a favour for the city, which is frustrating. You don't have to answer that. I'm just putting it up there because that's how I'm seeing it. Thank you.
Just have a question around, there was attachment B was missing, the line-by-line assessment of the zero carbon on the capital reports that we got in July. Sorry, not why am I saying July? January. And what is the process for getting that report tabled? Because I know it's been sent around council laws, but it hasn't got the visibility that it should have. So I guess I'm asking Mr. McLean is, how are we going to get that missing attachment, which was very important, in front of councillors?
We can certainly table it either at the next committee or as part of the May thing. It's
okay.
Just.
Yeah, it was an important piece. It was missing. And then I just think about the report in May, because council has asked for a report to come back. So are there two reports coming in May, or is there just one report?
We have only been instructed by way of resolution
Okay,
to produce
cool.
one report. If there is another report expected, then I'm not aware of it.
Okay, thank you. That makes it clear. Are there any more questions? Therefore, I will move that the committee notes the report, notes the attached reports on zero carbon work programme actions, including DCC inventory management report for 23-24, the Ōtepoti Dunedin greenhouse gas emissions inventory cruise ship emissions report, and the Zero Carbon Alliance collaboration group report. And I'll take speakers after I've spoken. Pardon? A second. Thank you, Councillor Gilbert. Just want to congratulate the team on this is all of the council team on the amazing result that has been here. We had an email back in December that was telling us how on track the DCC emissions were, and when we talk about showing leadership, I think that's really important to acknowledge that work's been done and the amazing work by the staff as well. When we look at the graph on page 76, it does definitely show that the DCC is on track. We have to acknowledge that the government changes aren't helping. We've put a couple of submissions in on the last couple of days, and I think that's making it a pretty bumpy road that we're travelling down. But I do want to, there were lots of questions around the business support pilot, and I think that's really important, and I was really pleased to see that the tourism industry was being targeted, especially given what we see about the cruise ship emissions and the importance of cruise economically to Dunedin, and it's always a balance. But if we can get in there and help the tourism operators to look at their emissions and how to manage them, because I think there's been a problem in the past, and I was at workshops a while ago when NEMB were putting money in, and there were just a lot of barriers. I mean, tourism operators were just slaughtered by COVID, and there's a lot of regulation, etc., that we put on businesses, on operators. So anything that we can do to make it easier and to make it more collaborative is a good thing. So I'm pleased that they will be going next week to talk to the tourism operators. I did just briefly mention Qualmark, and tourism itself is always, you know, we trade on 100% pure, clean, green New Zealand, and tourism is very aware of the effect of emissions. We are a place that it is, you have to take a long-haul flight to visit. You need to take a ship to visit. It's a couple of islands very, very far away. So I think that tourism as leadership in looking at emissions. And when I talk about tourism, I think that everyone around the table is going or has been on holidays, and we all need to look in the mirror about what holidays we choose to take, because we are talking about cruise as an amorphous thing, the cruise companies, etc., but what we're actually talking about is people and the choices that we make in life to travel and how we reduce those emissions. I really would like to see the terms of reference for the Zero Carbon Alliance opened up. I've been a big advocate of Business South being a member of the Zero Carbon Alliance, and they've got, I think it's 12 or 1,400 members, but huge links into all of the businesses and huge advocacy as well into government. So I really want to see them a member, but really hard to get other members to be part of the group. And I think if we're going to do it, we need to do it together. And like with the businesses, we need to cut the barriers down and try and welcome people on board, because if everybody wants to do it, then they should be part of the team. I think I've just got great work to the Zero Carbon team again for embedding a lot of the actions in council. When we looked at the report that we had last year, it showed that there was over 50% of the actions were BAU, and then there was another 40% that were BAU as well. So I really love that all of the different departments are working really, really hard to embed this as well. And I also thank you, Mr McLean, for talking about asking the Zero Carbon Alliance, have they pulled all of the levers as hard as possible? I think that's really important, because the DCC can show leadership, but we also need all of the other things, all of the everyone to be in the waka, going in the same direction. I will now open it to other speakers. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In 2019, Dunedin City Council declared a climate emergency. And at that time, It was very clear we were serious about that, and the city got behind us. Numerous people came and submitted to our council and begged us to remain a city that had ambitious goals and wanted to keep that goal of 2030. To sit here around this table today and listen to some people say, oh, but the others aren't meeting their targets, as if that's a defence for us overturning our vote to have a high investment in carbon zero is unbelievable.
Point of order. I think that's misrepresentation. I'm going to have to, sorry, Councillor Gill will ask you to roll on that.
Misrepresentation on what? Didn't overturn it. We had a vote.
Councillor, it is not up for discussion at the moment. I'll take a brief adjournment. Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Reversed, and there is still funding that has been applied to it. So I would ask you to withdraw your statement. I'm upholding, yes.
Thank you. I'll carry on. We made a vote.
I asked you to withdraw the statement, Councillor.
I'll withdraw the statement that I said that we overturned, but what I will carry on and say is that there was a previous vote, which I know I got flack for voting for, was where we voted to support a high investment in carbon zero. And
point of order. The ruling was to basically pull back on the statement that you made originally, and you haven't pulled back. Actually, in some cases, you've doubled down or reworded it.
What number is the point of order, please, Andrew? Thank you. I'll just adjourn. May I have a seconder? All those in favour? I will uphold the point of order, and I'll just ask the councillor to not relitigate the council decision, and please stick to what we're talking about, which is noting a report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Trump did this as well. Trump removed America from the Paris Climate Agreement, and look what that did to the world.
Did what as well? A point of order. You can't do something as well unless you're still referring to the thing you've been told to not refer to. A point of order.
What number?
Not taking instruction from the chair. There's basic misrepresentation. You're going back and saying the same thing.
I will uphold the point of order. Councillor Houlihan, please stick to what we're doing, which is noting a report, not making a political speech.
Sorry, I forgot I'm a politician and I'm around a political table. Okay. What I want to say about this, and I'll go back to what I said at the start, we declared a climate emergency in 2019. We were an ambitious council, we set high goals, and in my opinion, as the council who set that climate emergency, we have to set an example for every other business, organisation in the city and show them that we are serious about our commitment to climate emergencies. I can tell you now, the people in the 2015 floods and the recent floods here would agree that climate change is having an impact on our city. The people in LA who have had massive fires would agree that climate change is having an impact on their city. The people in Hawke's Bay would agree that climate change is having an impact on their city when they lost their homes. One of my best friends lost her whole home through floods and vicious weather. We need to set the example. We need to be the ones who are leading the way. It doesn't matter if it does matter, obviously, what other groups do, but our concern is setting an example. And if we weaken, then others will weaken because they'll say, why should we bother? And if there's a chance that we can't meet our 2030 ambitious goal, it's ahead of others, we are being very ambitious, then surely we should do everything in our power to try to get there. We shouldn't just give up. We need to put our best foot forward and make a commitment. I want a planet to live on, thanks very much. I have children who are growing up and I want them to be able to enjoy all the benefits of living in clean air environments, cities without major weather repercussions of climate change. It is going to change our whole planet, and we as a city have been ambitious to try to look to fight that. And I hope that we can remain ambitious and try our hardest to commit to this 2030 goal. Certainly, I know when I put my neck out, and I thought was very brave, to vote for the high carbon emissions, that I took flack for that, because I'm not a person who's interested in pedestrianising cities. I'm not a person I don't cycle around, only that I haven't bought an electric bike, but if I had an electric bike I might. But I don't want car parks taken away in Albany Street, but I do want a commitment to our carbon zero 2030 goal, and we can do it if we work with other businesses and other groups in our city. That's where our strength will come, is by us setting an example. And I would like more transparency on the Climate Action Advisory Group as to what discussions there were prior to this motion being made around what we've got now with the 9-year plan on the thing that I'm not allowed to mention. Thank you.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to go back to the climate emergency of 2019 and also the climate zero carbon 2030 that was put forward in 2020, and the Office of the Auditor General warning councils that they had got to stop greenwashing. Yes, we did pass those, and then for 2 years we did nothing. We planned and we planned and we planned and we didn't act. So if we want to talk about who hasn't done what, I am very tired of people who bottom line, don't seem to understand what was cut out or what we have done in the meantime, but have quite quickly gone to Facebook and determined that they are the righteous protectors of the planet. It's offensive to hear someone who complains about her red bin not being big enough to take her rubbish, who now turns around and says that she's going to be protecting us all from the floods of 2015. Well, what actually happened with the floods of 2015 and the floods of last year was that we spent a lot of money on improving our three waters, and that is because a lot of our carbon zero activity is embedded in the activity of what we are doing. I am tired of hearing people who are doing nothing but scoring political points to say that we have abandoned our targets. The co-funding for cycleways has gone. We haven't buried them, we haven't thrown them away, we're just simply putting it off until a government changes that we can get back into it again. And we've rounded our transport spend in other directions. Our 10-year target on doing what we're doing on carbon zero is unaffected. I'm tired of people who seem to not be able to read their papers rushing to the microphone and telling us how we have failed.
Councillor Vandervis.
There are some facts here that I think we all agree with. One was that in 2019 there was a climate emergency declared. Councillor O'Malley has said that for 2 years afterwards we did nothing, except maybe some planning. I actually don't believe that we've done much in the last 6 years, and we're halfway to the 10-year ambitious goal of zero carbon. Councillor Houlihan has said that climate change is having an impact with vicious weather, and that's his maybe. My view is that we are looking here at noting a report that's 108 pages long, and this 108 pages long report is one of many reports that we've had in the last 6 years since the climate emergency. And apart from the number of trees that were cut down to produce it, I can't see that these reports and all this detailed counting of carbon footprint and all the other work that is so diligently being done by our climate change team is having any impact on climate change. Councillor Houlihan has said the climate change is having an impact with vicious weather, but are we, in what we've been doing, having any impact at all on climate change? I would suggest not. I would also suggest that even if we did spend the $110 million that a large number of our councillors wanted us to spend in the last couple of weeks on the high carbon emission reduction program, that even if we did spend that $110 million, most of which, by the way, would have to be debt funded because we are so far in debt already, even if we did spend all that money, and with the best intentions in the world, and if everybody else got on board as well, it would still have no impact on the climate. What are we doing? Is this the most elaborate attempt to convince ourselves that we have the power to change the weather, and that what we are doing is changing it in the right direction? To me, this report, this whole climate emergency strategy, is an extreme arrogance. The weather will do what the weather is going to do, and what we think we're able to do to affect it, I think is highly questionable. A 108-page report that we have to note now is certainly not going to help, and that's the reason I won't vote for it.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. I understood this was a zero carbon update report that we were noting, so I'm happy to support noting this report, and also some of the in everything in it. When we look at the data for the 23-24 financial year showing that DCC has achieved a 29.75% reduction in overall emissions compared to 2018-19, it shows that we're moving in the right direction. When we look at council, waste makes up 57% of DCC's emission inventory. When you look at our long-term plan, there is a lot of money going into that space. to improve that area. When we look at our wastewater treatment accounting at number 2, accounting for 19% of emissions, and we look at our long-term plan, there is a lot of investment going in there as well. The cruise report, Dunedin City cruise ship emissions report was something of great interest to me, and I personally benefit from it in the last 6 weeks. When I look at the benefits of cruise, and I note the Port Otago independent report that came out last year, $187 million in support for the city, investment and contribution to the city's economy, and supporting directly and indirectly 1,400 jobs. Cruise is a big part of our city and may it continue. We are going to be seeing a reduction in ships. But the other thing is the ships that we see in New Zealand ports are totally different to see what they have in the Mediterranean or in the Caribbean. A ship has to come a long way here to support the Australian-New Zealand cruise industry. And trust me, the cruise industry do not send their poor performing ships, they send their best performing ships because they know how much fuel they have to use to even get here. So when you look at where the cruise industry is progressing and the new technologies and how quickly they're adapting, that is a very strong benefit for our region, and we will see that continually across our city and around New Zealand. We also need to note that, as I mentioned, there is going to be a reduction in cruise ships, but actually the passenger yield is staying up. It's a case of how they're better managing the traffic and the passengers when travelling around New Zealand. And actually, you know what, anybody travelling to New Zealand, the problem we have is our tyranny of distance. You know, when I had 60 Americans and Canadians, every one of them were raving about New Zealand and being here. It's not like they're going to Mexico or they're travelling across the border to the US. It's not like living in the UK and travelling to France or Germany. New Zealand is a destination, and when they get here we have a lot to offer and they love it. So let's support the tourism industry, the cruise industry on that basis. Let's focus on what we can do as a city, and I think in our long-term plan we're showing a lot of investment in that, and I appreciate the report. Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you. And just on that last point as well, I think Councillor Wiley just hits something I'd just like to raise, because I think Madam Chair, you raised it in your opening comments around people taking holidays, and fortunately in my case some of us have to get on planes to go and see dying families, so just also there are other reasons. Yeah, well, for me I had to go and see dying families, just that's an important factor for some of us. I'm going to try and bring some positivity to this, because again, as Councillor Wiley reports, it is just a zero carbon update report for noting, but those words zero carbon do get hackles up, of course. And I think first off, I want to thank the staff for yet again this incredible report. Anything that our zero carbon team produce seems to be of exceptional standard. And I think the closing comments from Ms McTavish about the positive community outcomes being changes we should absolutely celebrate is spot on, actually. And I think talking about these successes creates a snowball effect in the community that has more value than most of us can actually imagine. And again, Councillor Wiley, sorry to pick on you, but you did mention about the positive effects of the cancellation of the Wellington jet, but I think that has to be counterbalanced with the potential economic impacts that will create. So it sort of speaks to the difficulty of the pros and cons that exist here. I won't relitigate some of what the councillor next to me talked about, because I don't want a point of order called on me, and I do have strong opinions around that, but I'll probably defer to the community feedback we'll get through the consultation process in the coming months. So, but I do want to just speak a wee bit about the cruise report, because I think it's timely and long overdue. And as Councillor Wiley does correctly state, cruise ships do bring economic benefit to their host cities. But the jury is actually out around the world on how much that is, because many of the calculations are speculative and anecdotal and open to dispute. Although I think we can agree they're somewhere in the region of the figures we see. But what is absolutely not open to dispute is the carbon footprint implications from cruise ships, because it's well known. It's not hyperbole. It's fact. Cruise ships emit large amounts of CO2 per passenger, and most estimates across the planet suggest that cruise emits as much CO2 per passenger per day as flying long haul. So it's not insignificant. In fact, it's substantial. And measuring emissions from cruise ships is important for a number of reasons, many of which we probably are aware of. Environmental impacts are clear. Cruise ships burn, sadly, large amounts of heavy fuel oil, producing not only CO2, but sulfur dioxide, oxides, nitrogen oxides, and large amounts of particulate matter. These emissions contribute not only to climate change, but they also contribute to air pollution. I know that well, living in Port Chalmers. It does affect human health, especially in the West Harbour, and of course actually in the wider city when those smaller cruise ships berth up here in town. So measuring those emissions will help us assess and mitigate health risks such as respiratory diseases and cardiovascular problems. And let's not forget water pollution as well. The ships create sewage and grey water, and whether we like it or not, there is discharge from toilets, kitchens and showers, which can affect, particularly here in Otapoti, Dunedin, our very valuable marine ecosystems, which are, of course, important to our economic driver, which is ecotourism. And ballast water, of course, I know it can introduce microorganisms that again can impinge on our natural environment. There's also heavy metals and oil spills from waste from engine operations, which can pollute the ocean, and these are much documented across the world. So by tracking these emissions, the industry can hopefully develop and invest in cleaner technologies. I think we'll all agree on that, such as hybrid propulsion systems, hydrogen fuel cells, and battery-powered ships. And that final point, and I will close momentarily, is really vital for us here. I'm personally not anti-cruise ships, but I am pro, and I think we all will be pro the cruise ship industry upping its game if it wants to extract, because if it wants to extract an environmental and health cost for profit, it should invest at least some of that profit in vigorously lessening the environmental and health impacts that impinge on us here in Otapoti, Dunedin. Thank you for being generous with the time, Madam Chair.
Thank you everyone for your input. It's always great to get it. Yes, there was a climate emergency declared in 2019, and as Councillor O'Malley said, it did take a while to get the plan, and I do recall asking in many debates, where is the plan and when do we get on with it? I think that it's a real, unfortunately, implying that we've abandoned it is a slap in the face to both council and council staff who've come to us with a fantastic report showing us that the DCC, that all of the departments have been working hard to lower council emissions, and they've done a great job. That's in the DCC Inventory Management Report. And I think Councillor Walker was talking about celebrating success, and I think that's what we should be looking at today, is about the success of what Council's been doing, leading the way and setting an example. In the draft plan that we just passed, we had $68.9 million of new capital that had direct influence on lowering our emissions, $29.5 million of capital which was contributing to lowering our emissions. That's $100 million of investment by council, capital investment, debt investment into lowering our emissions. Also note that in the 9-year plan we have $8.6 million, on average $955,000 OPEX for the team, for operations of the Carbon Zero team. So you cannot say that we are not looking at how we reach those targets. Councillor Malley also just brought up the Auditor General advice, and that is something that we asked when we were going back to get a report in May, is what is the Auditor General saying about greenwashing? Because if we set a target and we are not meeting it and not being honest about whether we meet it or not meet it, then that has serious implications with the Office of the Auditor General. And we look forward to some good advice from them as well. Councillor Vandervis picks up some points on the January report, which is around what we can and can't influence. And I think during question time, it was certainly noted in the report we got in January that it was possible that the DCC organisational target can be achieved with projects that are in draft budgets alone. So we are showing the leadership there. And then it talked about the city scale, and that's when we talk about the partnerships there. I do disagree about the power to change the weather, and perhaps that's what the Paris Agreement is about. That is, and one of the councillors mentioned Mr. Trump, unfortunately, because we do have the power in ourselves to change it, and that's why I suggested that we all look in the mirror about our behaviour and about the choices that we make as well. Councillor Wiley went back to the report and talked about the DCC achieving its targets and the city investment, and also cruise's importance to the city. And as Councillor Walker said, it is about balance. You know, we appreciate that that cruise is important to the city, that it is a big economic enabler, that it employs people that work in the city, but it's also a challenge, and there's challenges about the impacts of cruise environmentally, the social licence that is required as well. And one of the things that I guess I said that I was glad that the tourism industry is being targeted, because that is part of the work that needs to be done by the industry as a whole, and also by the government. Councillor Walker talked about the cruise industry upping its game, and I did have a big look to try and find out how the cruise industry was upping its game, and it was a little challenging, quite frankly, to find how the cruise industry was doing that. And that's up to governments to actually go, well, that's not okay. You know, you can't use your scrubbers, or you do need to use your scrubbers when you're in port. You need to find different sources of fuel, etc., etc. So I think that we need our government to be strong about that as well. We've also looked at where the tourism strategies are going, which is about those high worth, and I'm not going to say high net worth, I'm going to say high worth visitors that we're looking at bringing to the country. So I think there's some leadership that the tourism industry, specifically on cruise, needs to show, and through the Cruise Action Plan, Dunedin is also showing that it's doing that. So I will close now and put the motion that we note the report. All those in favour say aye. Against?
No. Recorded, please.
I declare the motion is carried. Now, are there any items for consideration by the Chair? Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the terms of reference for the Zero Carbon Plan Advisory Panel, which was established last year. I understand it's met a couple of times, but I'm not sure if there's been any reporting directly to us. But anyway, what I'm concerned about is that from reading the responsibilities and functions in the terms of reference, and people need to look at that for themselves, it seems to me that it hasn't fulfilled those functions, the committee, and I voted against establishment at the time. I think we need to look at it and have a report, a paper back from staff and yourself about whether it has a future, because as I say, I believe it's patently failed to perform the responsibilities detailed in its terms of reference, and that's all. I don't want to prolong it today.
Can I ask you to identify where the failures are, sir?
I'm asking staff and the chairman to look at that.
You said it's patent. You said there are patent failures, so I assume you can spot them.
In the terms of reference, councillor, we patently obvious that the committee has not delivered on.
What has it not delivered on? You've quite stated twice.
So let's just
it is. Well, I don't know where I was standing in order. I guess you can take on the good councillors.
Point of order. There's no standing orders here. He's just randomly yelling out.
Did you have a number for your point of order, Councillor Hurlan? I'm not going to uphold the point of order. I think that everyone's made their points, and we will look forward to a report possibly coming back to this group, given we've only got a couple more meetings. Now I will close with a karakia. Oh, sorry. Unuhia ki te urutapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, te kako, te tinana, te wairoa i te ara takatu, ko ia rai rauko, whakairea, aki ki ruka, kia tina, huie, taikie. Meeting is closed.